Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the June edition of Molten Music Monthly. Molten Music Monthly is my roundup of all the things that I thought were cool and interesting in the world of computer music, music technology and modular synthesis. So we're talking software and hardware, interfaces and synthesizers, Eurorack and virtual studios, knobs and surfaces. The whole lot, all crammed in one place. Lots to get through this month, so let's get on with it. If you follow my Surface Pro Audio Twitter feed, then you'll know that last week I had a little bit of bother with my pre-order of the brand new Surface Pro. Yes, I do have to buy my own Surface Pro. Microsoft don't give them away, no matter how much people think that they should. So, you know, even someone as awesome as me has to buy one. Anyway, apparently my order sort of hung and got stuck, and there was nothing that I could do to free it, nothing anyone at the Microsoft store that I was phoning up could do to sort of sort it out. It just sort of sat there staring at me, while meanwhile the Surface Pro was being released and it was getting in stock at PC World and John Lewis, and I had an immensely frustrating time. However, all of my moaning and whinging ended up highlighting a bug in the system that's now been fixed and has saved the world. So that's nice. Suffice to say, it all got sorted out and now I have a nice new shiny Surface Pro to play with. Oh yes, going to do a lot of fun things with this. So my new season 3 of Surface Sessions will be kicking off very soon as I've worked out how to get it out of the box. Staying with computers for a moment, Intel have released their next generation of exciting new processors and have introduced the Core i9. Previously we've had i3, i5, i7, and so the i9 seems like a natural extension of it. What does it mean? It means a whole load of more cores stuffed into the same sort of space, and of course you're all going to have to change your motherboards in order to accommodate it. The Core i9 takes us up to 18 cores within the one processor. I mean, we've already seen this with Xeon processors, so it's not as if it's exactly new, but the way that they are packaging it and pricing it and delivering it to sort of the more mainstream desktop is something we've not seen before. So that's quite exciting. So it means more plugins, more polyphony, more instruments, and more stuff to be able to run on your computer. It's going to be paired up with the X299 chipset, so it means a whole new motherboard, not new RAM though necessarily, because it's still using DDR4, and so other bits and pieces are going to continue to work with it. But of course, isn't it about time that you had a nice new shiny PC? An audio PC maybe from Molten Music Technology. That would be nice. One really cool thing they're doing is that they're introducing an i5 processor to go with this. Now normally i5 and i7 are most commonly found on their desktop sort of mainstream platform, whereas this, the Core i9 and the X299 board, is kind of their extreme, their high-end workstation system. It's what we use in the Studio Pro, or at least it will be the next generation of Studio Pro. And by introducing a more sort of entry-level value processor to that range, it means that you can get on board with the high-end stuff and start off with a processor that's actually not going to break the bank. So you can start off at a reasonable price with an i5 and then upgrade to the i9 when you find a bunch of money somewhere. Now that really appeals to me. In other news, it turns out that Intel are really pissed off with how Thunderbolt has been going, and so have decided to bake it into the processor itself. So they can't be doing with all these people messing around with the technology. Does it work? It might work, does it not? What connection is it? Does it, who, do Clarets work, do Apollos work? Who knows? It's a mess. So Intel have grabbed it, stuffed it in the CPU and say, look, in the future, it will be in the processor and all you've got to do is provide a port. All right, is that okay? Can we all just get on with it now? And that seems like a really good idea to me. Sadly, not in these processors, not in the Core i9. It will be in a generation down the road that we'll be seeing the Thunderbolt technology built directly into the processor. Smart move, Intel. That's the only way that you're going to standardize it as an interface. And hopefully it will sort out all the weirdness that we've had to contend with Thunderbolt over the last year or so. The award for the most ridiculous plugin of the month goes to Dada Life's Endless Smile. It's an epic build-up plugin. You slap it on and it instantly creates a kind of an EDM build-up thing to a massive, yeah, crowd goes crazy kind of thing. It's got this horrible looking graphic on it of this person going, oh, to yay! I mean, I guess if it's going to make your live performance more exciting, then just slap it in every other bar, I would say. With Complete 12 still refusing to appear, Native Instruments do occasionally drop us a new thing. And this new thing is called Thrill. It sounds really exciting, looks really exciting, but I kind of think it's just yet another bundle of huge cinematic sort of source library. We have so much of this stuff now, just terabytes and terabytes of orchestral sounding, cinematic, filmic, soundtrack type stuff instantly available at the touch of a few buttons and knobs and levers and stuff. I mean, it's amazing really the sort of sound possibilities and sonic escapes that are out there that we can generate with our computers. It's just amazing, but there's so much of it that I just don't know what we're supposed to do with it all. I mean, everybody out there must be making soundtracks. I mean, you can't throw a stick without hitting a sound designer who is creating another soundtrack for some superhero movie. It's everywhere. We are atmospherically crazy and overloaded, I think. Anyway, Thrill is packed full of goosebump raising, spooky sort of tension and atmospheric sounds. 30 gigs of it, 1,000 presets, all designed by that special bunch of preset designers that everybody seems to use. And it has a super simple interface where you can kind of morph between all sorts of weird sounds just on like an XY vector pad. I mean, how is it different from all the others that are out there? I have no idea. But to me, I thought it looked really, really nice. Into the weird world of modular synthesis, we have the alarmingly named AllFlesh, which is something you really don't want to put into Google. These are these awesome little conductive pads that are mounted on the back of patch jack socket things that you jam into patch sockets on your modular, and then you can use your fingers to connect them up. The signal is sort of flowing through your body and connecting and modulating and moving audio and control voltage from one place to another. Quite fascinating. I mean, you can just experiment with going over here and over and take this modulation source and whack it on over here. I kind of like it. I kind of like it a lot. It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, how much of the signal is lost through your body, getting from one side to the other? I have no idea. I probably should look at it a little bit deeper. But for $26 for 10 of these things, that's not bad. That's got to be worth a punt, hasn't it? The only downside being that you have to actually solder the things together, but then it's just a plug and a plate, so it can't be that hard, can it? Anyway, I'd go and check that out, and don't Google it, just follow the link down here. What the hell happened to the AudioFuse? I mean, we first saw it back in 2015 at NAMM, I think it was, and when it was fully revealed and announced, this premium desktop audio interface that was really interesting looking in, you know, strange quirky colors. It had all these knobs and stuff on the top. The idea being that you have a knob for everything, so you're not having to menu dive or click through things or anything like that. It looked great, and then it vanished. And over 2 years later, they've finally released it without kind of a word about why it took so long. Apparently they were trying to perfect it, whatever that means, but there's no spec changes to it. There's been no change in the marketing. It's all the same box just 2 years later. Now, a lot of things can happen in 2 years. I mean, I would say 2 years ago that modular synthesis, for instance, was still just sort of bubbling away in the background. And even though Arturia have a couple of things with CV on them, it wasn't anywhere near the attention and sort of middle ground that it's taking these days. So a couple of years ago, it wouldn't have crossed your mind to make any of the inputs or outputs DC coupled in order to allow it to interface with Eurorack and control voltage. But today, if you're inventing an audio interface, then that's absolutely something that should be #1 on your list of things to do. So it feels to me that although it's still a premium audio interface, it looks great, got a lot of great features, it just feels like it's now behind the curve. I mean, what would have been awesome in 2015 is now kind of, yeah, that's all right, but there's other stuff around which is similar. You know, everything from the new M-Audio M-Track desktop ones up to the Apollo's Twin and the Zen Tour and things like that. There's a lot of these desktop interfaces around now, and they're all really very good. So in many ways, Arturia seem to have missed the boat a little bit. They had the chance back then, and then, you know, now it still looks good, but it just doesn't have a killer edge to it anymore. The other thing that slightly worries me is that it talks about how they're not going to use proprietary drivers. Oh no, this is going to be using generic USB class compliant drivers just to make the whole world much simpler. Now I have a little bit of a problem with that, because that generally means sort of 5 to 10 milliseconds of latency on a PC. So I don't know, I mean, they're claiming 3 milliseconds. I don't know how you get that from class compliant drivers. You only get that from an ASIO protocol, at least in Windows. So what do they mean by that? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, I guess. Maybe Wasapi is finally coming into its own and we can all use that happily. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, great interface. 4 in, 4 out, lots of controls on the front, big fat knob, ADAT in and out, which is also interesting. Yeah, 500 quid-ish. Quite a lot. We'll see how that goes. Now, I tried really hard to see the rolly blocks as something more than kind of a squishy toy type thing. And with recent videos and showing how it can be used as a door controller, it's really starting to, yeah, I can see how that could work. Well, they've just released a Seaboard controller for it. Now, the Seaboard stuff is Rolly's big, weird MPE controller keyboards with all the fudgy stuff that you squidge around and got pressure and moving forwards and backwards in order to play interesting and weird MPE sounds. And they've released this little weeny sort of 2-octave one that goes along with the blocks. You slap the blocks on the side or on the front and it all integrates beautifully and wonderfully. And that's the kind of thing that's going to make blocks look a hell of a lot more interesting to people like myself. So suddenly I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I could do with a little bit of lighty, squishy, glowy in the darky, squishing, pushing, touching stuff in my life. Maybe I can. Folktek are obviously just a bunch of stoners who spend their time talking nonsense and coming up with really out there Eurorack modules. And that's cool, I'm like well into that. And the Altair is certainly one of those modules. Well, there's actually 2 modules. There's an Altair 1 and an Altair 2. Altair 1 is kind of a sort of a grainy dub delay, sort of phasing kind of module, whereas the Altair 2 is kind of a phasing, grainy, dub delaying type module. To be honest, I'm not really sure how they differ, and I can't work out which does which and which does the other. But they're both sort of multi-effects units that bring in a lot of kind of weird modulation and laid-back craziness to your Eurorack system. They look spacey and spectacular, and they are completely identical to look at. And either of them would look completely awesome in your rack. Although which one to get, again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't really understand why they couldn't have put just 2 banks of effects in the one, or have a switch that switches between them, or have them have swappable something or other that you put in. I don't know. In any case, they look pretty groovy to me. Very sadly, I have to announce that Rebirth RB 338 is dead. It's official, Roland have decided that 20 years is long enough to put up with these upstarts propeller heads stealing their intellectual property. So they said, no, you can no longer use it. It has to go. Rebirth RB 338 was an awesome emulation of the TB303 baseline synth and originally a TR-808 drum machine, which then added a TR-909 as well. So it was 2 basslines and 2 drum machines, and it was a great piece of software. It was a groundbreaking piece of software. I mean, this was back in 1997, and it was before ASIO, before VST, before Steinberg had invented these protocols for low latency audio. But it didn't matter with Rebirth because you didn't play it from a keyboard. It was kind of the first real software synthesizer. And because it worked on step sequencing, you didn't have to play it. There was no problem with latency. You would just program it like you would the real thing, and then you would play with the knobs as it played back. It was brilliant. I mean, combine it with a Fat Boy controller, which was this great sort of yellow bank of knobs, and you could have just acres of fun. I mean, it was superb. I mean, they only really surpassed it when it eventually gave birth to Reason, and they've taken that on and gone forward with it. But, you know, as a little product by itself, it was just amazing. Its only one real annoyance was that you had to have the CD in the drive to run it. I mean, you know, that was why it was so often cracked. And so often you would run the cracked version because it was just simpler. Well, I guess that Roland have finally cottoned on to what it is that people like about synthesizers. And that brings me neatly on to a new boutique series synth from Roland that is completely analog. All the other boutique series, the Jupiter and the whatever it was, they were all using Roland's ACB analog circuitry behavior modeling technology. So it was essentially a digital synth, but with analog modeling built in to recreate classic old vintage synths. Not this time, no, no. Roland have got together with Studio Electronics. Now, Studio Electronics have been building analog synthesizers for decades, all the way through the years when everyone else was using digital. They kept on with the old analog stuff, and they still do to this day, and they have some of the most awesome replications of old filters and bits of vintage gear that stuck into their own modules and their own synthesizers. Well, Roland and Studio Electronics have got together and produced the SE-02, and it was a genuine collaboration of Studio Electronics bringing their sort of stuff together with Roland's heritage and bits and bobs and scientists and electronics and all that, and putting together a proper analog synth. Now, it looks every bit like a Moog, like a Model D, to a degree in sort of layout, and it certainly has a Moog-inspired ladder filter inside, which I imagine is one of Studio Electronics' contributions to the product. It has a great 16-step sequencer all built in, lots of knobs on the front, some CV and gate in and out. It's a great thing, and it's going to be $499. I mean, that's really giving Behringer a slap, because Behringer have been banging on about their little Model D, Behringer D synth for ages. And they reckon that was going to be $499. So along come Roland and Studio Electronics, who have a lot more sort of heritage and experience and synthesis chops to bring to the party, and they're sort of undercutting Behringer. Very interesting. But what's also interesting is that Studio Electronics have quite a portfolio of old filters and bits and pieces that they've done. They've covered ARP, they've covered all the Roland stuff, the Jupiters, but they've also covered the CS80 filter and the SEM filter. So if this is a collaboration which is going to continue, then we could well be seeing more boutique versions of ARP 2600s or CS80s, or who knows, or a SEM or something of that nature. It's very exciting. Except the boutique form factor is really quite small. I mean, I was quite excited about this synth until really I saw a picture of it in the K25M sort of boutique keyboard expansion, which is mini keys that attach to a boutique synth. And it's just weeny. I mean, suddenly you look at the knobs and they're tiny. I mean, they're tiny like the Behringer D ones are as well. And that's a bit of a problem. They're really, really, really very small. It's a shame because it just steals away from what otherwise could be an awesome sort of analog synthesizer experience. But it does sound great. I don't know. Do we need big knobs, small knobs? Does it matter? I mean, if they're going to stick an ARP in there, it's going to be like really weeny sliders. We just don't know. But exciting times. Roland have actually released an analog synthesizer, which bodes well for the future of synthesis, I think. What a great thing. What a great thing for them to have done. Following on from Magnificent Descartes' Dream that I talked about last month, there's a new plugin called Arminator. Now, Arminator is a software version of the Yamaha CS80, and it's free. It was put together by Crackly Plugins, apparently for a sound designer called Armin Kujashi, I think. And he responded by creating a whole bunch of patches for it, which are inspired by Vangelis. So the Arminator, in its glorious kind of slightly low-res GUI, can offer up some extraordinarily wonderful Blade Runner-esque type sounds, which is kind of what we want. That's what we want from the CS80. That's what we're after. And it's completely free. All you got to do is get over to their Facebook group and sign up for that, which I guess is something, and you can get access to it for free. Not one to be outdone, IK Multimedia have released a massive collection of synthesizers. It's a bunch of classic synths and vintage whatnots bundled up in something they're called Sintronic. It's got more synths than the Arturia V collection. They've got like 38 different synthesizers being moduled, over 2,000 presets that you shouldn't ever use because you want to be making your own sounds. And it's all wrapped up in a similar sort of interface that Arturia did with the Analog Lab, in that they're all stuffed into one thing, and you go through all the presets and you can have different interfaces depending on what instrument you are using. You've got your Moogs, you've got your Overheims, you've got your Profits, you've got your Jupiters, your Arps, your CS80s, you've even got an Alesis Andromeda and a Yamaha SY99. I mean, who needs one of those? They've created this special drift technology that makes the oscillators sound a bit crap, which is nice, and they spent a lot of time with some special deep hardcore modelling of the filters. It's 100 quid, it's probably the best thing ever. And finally, last month I mentioned how it would be really cool to have some kind of modular meet in Norwich. Well, as it turns out, there was one about a week later. Well, not a modular meet as such, but a synthesizer meet, put together by a guy called Bill Cerebral in the Birdcage, a pub in Norwich. There was beer, there was the odd synthesizer little box, and there was lots of noise and beeps and sounds and chatting. It was cool. I took myself along. I took my rack along, dumped that down. Look at this. Whoa. You know, just showing off on that, I guess. And I was surprised by how enormously fun it was. I mean, I kind of thought, you know, a bunch of sort of synth nerds getting together would feel a bit sort of awkward and weird, and everyone just sort of making noises and not quite sure what to do. But it wasn't like that at all. There was a little bit of that, sure, but it was mostly just sort of playing. I mean, it was really interesting because it gave me an opportunity to sit down, to get slightly drunk, and at the same time focus heavily on crafting sounds. Because I don't do that often enough, anywhere near often enough. And just spending time sitting there fiddling, you know, stuff started to emerge, and sounds and scapes and modulations and moving about. It was sublime. And I mean, there was only 4 of us, and we had everything plugged into a little mixer, and we had an MS-20, fabulous thing, making noises over here, a Bastille Castle doing stuff, and a Korg Volca keys, and it was all bubbling and squawking and going ahead. It was great. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was amazing. Well, we're going to try and do it every month, I think, as far as I know. So there'll be another one on the 10th of July. So if that's interesting to you, if you live in or around Norwich or anywhere within reach, really, it's just, you know, getting together in a pub, plugging a couple of things together and making noises. It's not any more complicated than that. There's no manufacturers, there's no workshops or anything like that. It's just, you know, some people getting together to really annoy the students who are trying to drink their glasses of water. So get along to the Facebook group. It's called the Norwich Synthesizer Group. Search for it in Facebook and you'll find us, and come along, it'll be great. I'm certainly going to the next one. I'll see how we do after that, because I'm not always free on a Monday night, or am I? Maybe I am. Ideal. And hopefully it will become a bit of a thing. So what am I doing next? Well, next I'm working next week, hopefully full on into sorting out DC coupling and Bitwig 2.1. That's the plan. I need to get that one nailed down. So all about how do you get control voltage into and out of Bitwig and into your modular. So that's going to be good. And alongside that, I'm going to start looking at the Surface Pro, seeing what it can do, what it can run. Can it run anything? We don't know yet. In some ways, I'm too scared to even install anything just in case it doesn't work. I don't know, but hopefully it will be fine. And until next time, go and make some tunes.